everybody, and welcome to another episode of Insufficient Friends. I'm Kevin. She's Nikki.
Hi.
And this week, Nick, we have another special friend joining us, special guest, and that would be one of my friends from work, Tom. How's it going, Tom?
Good. I guess I'm now deemed insufficient.
You're deemed insufficient.
I feel very privileged.
welcome to the group of friends.
Thank you.
It is hopefully growing. You know, we try, but it nobody listens. So
That's okay.
Hey, Tom always listens and always comments.
Tom listens. I do know he.
I don't know that I comment.
I don't think he's ever
commented. I don't really comment on anything though, so don't feel like I'm just singling you out.
Oops, bye.
Uh-oh.
Yep. I think your camera just died on us.
I think it fell over.
It did fall over. As you can see, Nikki is on Zoom because she has moved. And can we still hear her? Nikki, can you hear us?
No, I think
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
She is.
Yeah, we can hear you. We just can't see you anymore.
Yeah. Well, that's what you get when you set up your Zoom on top of a moving box. I'll fix it.
Okay.
I thought maybe she was having an earthquake or something.
That's
You're not
possible.
down in the boot heel, are you?
No,
I'm not. I mean, we moved to Kansas City.
Oh, man. But anyway, Tom, while we're waiting for this to be resolved, how was your week?
It was good. It's been a good week. I'm glad it's Friday.
I'm always glad it's Friday.
Yeah.
It's always... this was a hot week, though. It was miserable.
Yeah, it was very miserable.
It was just terrible. Nick, how was your week?
It was good. Sorry, I was trying to fix it.
That's fine.
Just moving is such a cluster. Clearly, it's going really well. And trying to list the house in Columbia at the same time while working, it's just a lot.
Yeah, I'm sure.
But good.
Moving's always a pain, too. Like,
Yes.
I've always been one to try to move everything in one day. Like, one big go and
that's
get
the
it all
best way to
done.
do it.
Yeah, because then you're just done.
Yeah.
Like, usually I'm doing it until, like, 4 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
But
And invite friends.
Yeah.
Feed them lunch.
Exactly.
And
then just get it done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Rent a big truck.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Get everything on one truck.
And just get it moved.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the best way to do it.
Yeah.
I agree. And we did not do that. So that's why it was a little bit of a cluster.
So this week, for all you listeners and watchers of whatever we're doing here, we're going to talk about a couple things, but one of them is going to be cryptids, like Bigfoot, the Missouri Monster, stuff like that. And once Nikki gets readjusted here, she's got a little bit of the history of the Missouri Monster in particular, I think. I looked a little bit into the history of just Bigfoot in general. And one of the things that I found was apparently there's paintings at a site called Painted Rock in Central California from an old tribe, like indigenous peoples.
I have heard that before.
Date back to like 1,000. They estimate they're anywhere from 500 to 1,000 years old. And picture a large, hairy Bigfoot, what you'd think of as Bigfoot type creature.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because that just like, it's been something I feel like in the past few years that's kind of blown up really big and gotten a lot more a lot more in the zeitgeist, but it goes back a long time. Like there's stories of it that go back a long time, and and people around the world have similar stories. Thousands of people around the world have similar stories. So
I did look up like the Yeti and the abominable snowman. I mean, that goes back to like pre-Buddhist Eastern civilizations. So it's wild.
Yeah. Which is, that's thousands of years ago. So, which is interesting that it's something that goes back a lot of time. And you've watched it, I watched it, and I think Nikki watched a couple of them too, was the Survivorman. When he did a whole Bigfoot series. Les Stroud did.
I think maybe 10 episodes.
Yeah.
On Bigfoot.
Which was really interesting because he talked about in the first one, like how he kind of went in as an open-minded, but as a skeptic. Like he wanted to see what was going on, and he used it to, we got our back.
Kevin, I broke your camera.
It's a little close.
I know. I broke your other one, so this is my backup camera.
Oh, okay.
Uh-oh.
Well, luckily,
back.
luckily
Yeah,
we have
sorry.
insurance, so
Yeah.
luckily we have insurance on that, so that's good.
Sorry.
Welcome back.
Thanks.
Okay? Can you zoom out any, or is this it?
Kevin, I broke your cat. I'm trying my best.
Okay,
We are so bad at that. I shouldn't say we, it's me. I ruin it all the time. I'll just back up a little bit.
That works.
Okay, we're good.
Yeah, you can set the mic down. It's probably fine.
I have to back it up.
So are you, and I might be jumping the gun here, but are you going to be constantly now doing Zoom so she won't be here now that she's...
I'm sure there will be times when she's here to visit or something, or she's doing something. I think in a couple of weeks we're going to St. Louis and we're going to probably record some episodes together. But for the most part, yeah, it'll be on Zoom.
Okay.
So, which is why...
It's going well.
You got to start somewhere, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So...
No, next week we have a really fun trip planned. Kevin and I are going to go to St. Louis and see the art museum and the Fox Theater. We're going to do a tour, and then so we'll record that in person after. So it'll be good.
That'll be cool.
Yeah, we're excited to do that because I've always wanted to see the Fox. Never been there. I'd like to see a show, but a tour would be cool just to see the theater too. So
it's always fun to see behind the scenes.
Exactly. But anyway. Nick, what did you find out about specifically the Missouri Monster? Because the Bigfoot, I think of Bigfoot, I think of like Pacific Northwest, stuff like that. You know, you think of the Yeti, you think of the Himalayas and different things around the world. But we have one that's not as prominently known in Missouri called MoMo, or the Missouri Monster.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so MoMo is an ape-like creature. So everyone says similar to Bigfoot. So everything I saw said similar to Bigfoot, but slightly different. Mm-hmm. The first sighting was in Louisiana, Missouri in 1971 and 1972. Those were the first two sightings. So two little boys, these kids first saw him, and they said that he was walking through the forest carrying, trigger warning if anyone doesn't like animal cruelty or something, carrying a dead dog. And that was the first sighting in Louisiana, Missouri in the 70s. And they described him as having black furry hair covering its whole body, so much fur that you could barely see its eyes, and smelled absolutely horrible. So that was the first reported sighting in Missouri.
So 70s, that's, what is that, 50 years, about 50 years ago? A little over 50 years ago, something like that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, 71 would be 53 years ago.
Yeah. Okay.
And Louisiana's up right on the Mississippi River.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little river town there.
Interesting. Because you told me that you believe you've seen this too, which which is crazy. But you said you saw it more like in the middle of the state, right? Like around Mark Twain Forest.
Yeah. So I grew up in Texas County, so straight south of Columbia.
Okay.
About 3-hour drive. Mm-hmm. And our property that I grew up on bordered the Mark Twain National Forest. So I know this is hard to believe when I tell people this, but you could literally walk out our back door and walk for 10 miles and only maybe cross a couple of small roads. Mm-hmm. It was nothing but forest for miles and miles.
Yeah.
It was a wonderful playground to grow up in.
Oh, I'm sure.
But when we learned very quickly that there were a lot of things in the woods, and so you never went in the woods without a gun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so there were probably the most dangerous thing we had were packs of wild dogs.
Okay.
And so you would hear these wild dogs all the time. You'd hear them barking. You'd hear them up and down the hollers. You never really knew how far away they were because, the hollers will throw sound around.
Yeah.
And there was a few times where you'd hear them and they sounded way far away, and just a few minutes later, they're right on you.
Okay.
And so we had a couple of cases where we actually shot a couple of the dogs. And when you would do that, the rest would run away.
Yeah.
And these are I'm assuming these are dogs that people would abandon. Mm-hmm. We had a couple dogs that we found abandoned and kept them. And so, they were just mutts.
Yeah.
And so nobody, this is back in the 70s. Nobody did anything. 70s and 80s, nobody fixed their dogs or anything like that. So you
Yeah.
had all these dogs
Yeah.
running around. And they were always looking for food. You know, they're very mangy, scroungy dogs, you know. And so that was the big threat. But we also had, now my grandpa called them Black Panthers. And I don't know if they were actually Black Panthers or if they were mountain lions that were a darker color.
Darker color, yeah.
But my brother and I
Yeah.
did see one time.
Okay.
And very large cat, tail dragging on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, as big as a big dog.
Yeah.
And I know it scared us to death.
I came across something like that when I was younger too. I was going home one night, and I grew up around Springfield, just outside of Springfield, and I was going home driving and came across this, basically the same thing. This big black cat, the size of a large dog, just walking across the street at a slow pace. And it kind of spooked me. Luckily, I was in a car, so it wasn't, going to be a big thing, but it still was something that I didn't expect to see crossing the road.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
Well,
I don't think I've ever seen one in person, just like trail cams and things like that. Cause I grew up in a suburb. So there was no, we had 1 acre.
My grandpa used to say, now who knows if this is true? He had a lot of stories.
yeah.
But he used to say that I think he would say in the 40s, we didn't live too far from Fort Leonard Wood.
Okay.
It was, as the crow flies, probably 10, 12 miles to the north of us. But he always said that in the 40s, a circus train derailed and they had Black Panthers and they got loose and they were never found. Now, I don't know if that's true. I never have tried to look that up, but he would tell us that. And he said, you got to watch out for them because they could sneak up on you and attack you. And so we learned early, you didn't go out in the woods without a gun. So
Makes sense.
Yeah. Okay, Tom, I have to stop and ask a question. You said as the crow flies. I heard that the other day and I had to look it up, but I didn't get an answer. What does that mean? Does that mean in like the straightest direction or does that mean south?
No, it
means
just
in the
means a straight direction.
Yeah.
Because where I grew up, there were no straight roads. And so you would, if you wanted to say how far something was in a straight line, you would say as the crow flies. I guess I picked that up from my grandpa as well. So,
Yeah. Yeah, 'cause I'd never heard that until the other day.
Yeah, I haven't actually used that term in a long time, but but growing up, we used to say that all the time. But so you want me to get into my story of my encounter at this point? Is that what you asked me originally? I think it was. So I was 16. It was 1984.
Okay.
It was late. It was fall. I think it was like October, November time frame. And the reason I can remember that is because it was dark around 5 o'clock.
Okay.
It was mostly dark. It was kind of late dusk at that point. We had 2 cows that we milked every day. And so we had to get up before school and go milk the cows, and we had to do it when we got home from school. One of our cows at this time was pregnant, almost ready to calf. So we weren't milking her, of course, but she would come to the barn at the same time as normal to when she would be milked, because that's when we would feed them grain as well.
Okay. Yeah.
So she would still come to the barn. On this particular night, she didn't come to the barn. So my cousin happened to be with me. He had come home from school with me that night and was spending the night. And we were probably going to go hunting the next morning or something. I don't know. Because we used to do that all the time.
Yeah.
We actually used to carry our shotguns on the bus to school.
Different times.
Yes.
Very much different times.
Yeah. So we didn't do it a lot, but if one of us was going to the other's house to get up the next morning to hunt,
You would take it with
we
you.
would take our shotgun to school. And now you had to check in with the principal, and you had to show them it was unloaded.
Yep.
And now you could have your shells. Your shells were in a box,
Yeah.
But yeah, it's unloaded. And okay, go put it in your locker. Make sure your locker's locked.
Yeah.
And that was it.
Yeah.
So I'm old. So, but anyway, on this particular day, my cousin was with me. And so we're like, okay, well, she's not coming to the barn. She's probably having the calf. So we got to go find her because you don't want the calf. The calf is vulnerable and the wild dogs are going to come get the calf.
Yeah.
And so we got to go bring her to the barn.
Yep.
So it's almost dark. It's pretty much dark. So we get in our old farm truck, and we have this big field that we had to drive around the outside of. The field was probably 300, 400 yards long. I don't remember. It was a pretty long field. And so we would drive on the edge of the field. So as we're driving on the edge of the field, picture to my left in the driver's seat is the open field. To my right is the wood line.
Okay.
And there's a fence that we're driving next to. So we get in the field and start driving along the edge of the field. And out of the corner of my eye, I see something coming across the field, probably 75 yards in front of us, maybe a little closer, but it's to the left, going to our right, going to pass right in front of us. And I said to my cousin, "Do you see that?" And he goes, "Yes." And we could tell immediately that it was walking, but it was big.
Yeah.
And so in our mind, it didn't register what this was. It didn't look like anything we had ever seen, but it was dark, and the color of this thing kind of blended in with the night, And so I stopped the truck. He continued, or I say he, but this creature continued to walk, got right in front of us. I had the high beams on. He stopped right in front of our truck, 50, 60 yards in front of us, and stopped and looked right at us. And under his right arm is a newborn calf.
Which is just crazy that it's... Yeah.
So we're frozen.
Yeah.
I mean, we freeze. This thing is walking on two legs, I've always said he kind of has the face of a man, but it wasn't quite that way.
Yeah.
But I didn't know, I've never known how else to describe it. Now, you got to think at this point, I don't even know what Bigfoot is.
Yeah.
We're in the 80s. There's no internet. We have 3 TV stations. There's not all these shows. And so it's like, this is not something that we've ever even thought about. And we've certainly never seen it before. And so we're looking at this thing, and it takes me a few seconds to realize he's holding a calf. Okay, now you look at a newborn calf is 40 to 50 pounds typically. And I can easily take a calf and pick it up, but it takes 2 of my arms to do it.
Yeah.
And I'm going to have the calf standing up in front of me. I'm going to wrap my left arm around under its neck and my right arm around under its butt. And I'm going to pick it up that way.
Yeah.
And this thing had it under one arm. And so
it's wild.
So this thing is big. And for a few seconds, it looks right at us, looking into the headlights. Now, I have a 12-gauge shotgun on the seat between me and my cousin. It never even crossed my mind to pick that thing up. Yeah. I mean, we are literally frozen.
Yeah.
And so the only thing I was thinking was, if this thing starts coming toward us, what am I going to do?
Yeah.
And I didn't know. I didn't know what I was going to do. I had I just couldn't even think. And so it looked at us for just a few seconds, and it turned back to the woods and walked to the fence, with his left hand, pushed the top wire down, stepped over the fence, and walked into the woods and was gone. So I threw the truck in reverse, and we got out of there as fast as we could. And we ran into the house. And my mom, when we walked in, she goes, "You two look like you've seen a ghost."
Yeah.
I said, "Well." So the first thing I could think to do was call Grandpa. He lived 3 miles down the road from us. He had a huge farm, and he knew everything, So I called him, and I said, "Grandpa, you're not going to believe what we just saw." And so I told him, and he goes, "Oh, that's MoMo, the Missouri Monster." Now, at that point, I had never heard of that before.
Yeah.
And I said, "What the heck is that?" He goes, "I've never seen it, but I know people that has seen it." And that's what you saw. You saw MoMo. It's like a big ape looking thing. And I said, "Yeah, that's what we saw." He goes, "Well, they've never hurt anyone, so you'll be okay." And I'm like, "Okay." He goes, "Now, where's the cow?" And I said, "Well, I guess she's still out in the field somewhere." He goes, "Go get her and get her to the barn." And I'm like, now I didn't want to go back out there, but Grandpa's like, "Okay, wake up, go do your job.
Yeah.
You got to go take care, make sure she's okay."
Yeah.
And so, okay, so at that point, we walked out there. We each had a gun, and we walked out. We found the cow. We have flashlights at this point.
Yeah.
We find her. Of course, she's laying on the ground, afterbirth on the ground, no calf.
Yeah.
She's clearly had the calf. The calf is gone. And so we get her up and we get her to the barn, and we, that was it.
That was it. Yeah.
So, at this point, I think I said this, but we had no concept of Bigfoot. We didn't know what this was. And we didn't talk about it,
Yeah.
because everyone, you talk about that, you're nuts.
Yeah.
And so it was kind of it was dropped.
Yeah.
And me and my cousin, every once in a while, will be like, you saw that, right? Yep, I saw that.
Just have to make sure.
We saw the same thing. We
Yeah.
weren't dreaming, And Grandpa, the next time I saw him, he asked me a few questions about it. And he was like, that's great. That's good. That's cool you saw them, man. They're out there roaming around. He goes, there's probably a few families of them out there roaming around, but
Yeah.
they know how to hide.
Oh yeah.
So
That's what was so interesting to me too. I know we'll get into Survivorman, but the Bigfoot episode specifically, but they kept saying there's like little tribes of them. They'll make little homes, almost little signs for each other. That was wild to me. I had never thought about that before.
yeah. I all animals have a way to communicate with each other. Assuming this thing is an animal. I guess it is. I don't know what else it would be,
Yeah.
but they've got to have a way to communicate.
Well, and
Yeah.
also the other thing that I found interesting that I didn't really know about, but watching that Survivorman, those director's commentaries and stuff that he talked about, is there's some stories of them being almost like mystical, and because he talked about like there's several times when like his cameras just don't, like people go out there and their cameras just don't capture things, even though they normally would, or they work fine before, they work fine after, but it doesn't capture the instantaneous moment that something would have happened. And almost to where they have like a mystical kind of
The
thing
same
about
with like
them.
people say with when you are on like a paranormal investigation, they're like they drain the batteries, the cameras don't work. It's weird that there's that tie-in together with cryptids as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just can't even fathom that part of it.
Yeah. Well, it's crazy. And to like you're talking with the one that you saw when you were younger, you said that he pushed down on the top barb of the fence and then walked over it.
Yeah.
I mean, barbed wire fence, when I was around them on farms and stuff, they're like 4 or 5 feet high. So
they're about chest high.
yeah, so if he's able to just push it down and then step over it, that's got to be a pretty large creature.
Yeah, and the thing that is interesting is looking back on it, I don't really know how big he was. Other than having the calf under his arm.
Yeah.
But, I don't really know how far in front of us he was. I'm estimating, 50 yards, something like that. But I'm not really sure.
Yeah, and it's also nighttime. Like it's going to be hard to really,
And I'm not really at that point not really concerned about how big he is. I just don't know what it is.
Yeah.
It's not anything that it just didn't compute.
Yeah.
So today everyone knows about Bigfoot. So you picture being out there in that same situation and you see that, you have some kind of reference
Of what it,
on what it is. I had no reference. I had been to a zoo and I'd seen apes, but it wasn't an ape.
No.
But I had no cross reference. I was just like, what the heck is going on?
Yeah.
So it was almost in my mind like, is this really happening?
Yeah. Oh,
And
I get that.
I was just frozen.
Because that is, I mean, that's crazy. I don't know what it could be or what they could be or where they, I mean, I'm guessing they would have evolved from something else or been put here. I don't really know, but the fact that there's so many stories
different.
and so many stories
There's
from
so
around
many
the
different
world
theories.
Yeah.
that they can, it's kind of hard to not acknowledge that they exist in some way, shape, or form. Because, I mean, like you said, when you were growing up, 10 miles and you couldn't you wouldn't see but a road or two. Well, in that much forest, if you've got something that's been living out there forever and only really moves around at night and knows how to hide, it's going to be hard to find something out there.
Yeah, well, and the thing about where I lived, so, I mean, it was so vast. Mm-hmm. And there was something that Grandpa told us is back during the Vietnam War, there was two brothers that were draft dodgers that lived, their families were there in the area, and they didn't want to go to war.
Okay.
So they went out and lived in the woods for several years.
Yeah.
And were never found. And a few times, I guess, the Army went to try to find them.
Yeah.
And never could find them.
Yeah. I mean, it's going to be almost impossible.
Yeah. There were so many hollers. I mean, there were some caves back there. Yeah. There was plenty of water. There were some creeks. You could and enough. There were plenty of things to kill to eat. Mm-hmm. So if you knew what you were doing, you could survive back there. Yeah. Indefinitely. Mm-hmm. And these were farm kids. They didn't want to go to war, and whether you agree with that or not, that's beside the point. But they decided they didn't want to go, and so they went and survived in the woods. Yeah. And I know my cousin and I, at one point, and we never knew if that was true. Yeah. We were always like, oh, okay, that's kind of weird. But my cousin and I, at one point, we found this. It was like a cliff. It wasn't straight down, but there was this big cliff, and you could climb down these rocks to get down to the bottom. Mm-hmm. And as you step down into those where the cliff was, this first place you had to walk, there was this huge boulder, and there was like this area was probably 6 feet wide between the cliff and the boulder that you could walk through, and there was a roof built over that between the edge of the cliff and the boulder. Yeah, perfect shelter. Yeah, and it's like somebody had made that a shelter. Yeah, and so we were like, this would be a good place to live. Yeah, it was right near a creek, and we're like, I wonder if that's where those guys lived. Yeah. So
that's
anyway,
interesting.
Yeah. We just stumbled on it one day because we used to hunt back in there all the time. Mm-hmm.
I'm sure because it's I mean, like big open spaces, like it's I mean, there's no telling.
Yeah.
So
I know that other people, well, in that scenario, they didn't necessarily have a choice. They felt like they couldn't go to war and had to live in the woods. But the things like Survivorman and people who go out and do these like super intense camping trips where it's basically survival. So unappealing to me. I was watching the Costa Rica episode of Survivorman, not one of the Bigfoots, just one of the Costa Rica ones. And he just would dive out there and was swimming with sharks and so casually. Mm-hmm. It's like, oh, there's this school of fish that I need. There's a shark coming. I'm going to try to avoid it. I'm like, that sounds... I would never do that. It's just so unappealing.
Yeah. I very much enjoy watching him do it.
Yeah, I don't want to do it.
I don't want to do it.
Yeah. It's great to watch him do it, and he's done a bunch of different ones. Like he's also done ones where he was like, where he set it up like it was a plane crash, and he put his arm in a sling and acted like he had a broken arm, so he was trying to do everything with just one arm and stuff. So he did them a lot. Like he did a lot of different things, and he's always out there by himself too. He wasn't with the Bigfoot ones. He wasn't out there by himself. But the regular Survivormans he was. But it's just it was also interesting in the Bigfoot one specifically to hear him talk about how he he had heard things in the past that people he'd told him about when he started looking into Bigfoot, and he had heard things in the past doing other Survivorman things and didn't think anything about it, just thought like, oh, well, that's just a tree falling, or oh, that's just a dog or another animal or whatever. And he said he started to rethink some of those when he learned about some of this stuff, because he's like, and there was always things that he also talked about that were unexplainable to him. Like he just didn't know what was going on. Yeah. Which is interesting that he would be out in the woods that much and still never see one, but maybe hear one, not realize what it was. Yeah.
Yeah, and what I've heard him say is when he was out filming Survivorman, he was there for Survivorman. Mm-hmm. Like he's a filmmaker. Yeah. And that was his priority. Mm-hmm. So he talked about his Alaska episode where he was doing Survivorman in Alaska, and he's pretty sure he heard one very near his camp.
Mm-hmm.
And he even shows that footage
of him like looking up and
Yeah.
looking over all the time. Yeah.
Yeah, and he goes, I got to focus on Survivorman.
Yeah.
Like I don't have time for this other thing. Like I'm making a TV show here.
Yeah.
So
We'll put a link to the Bigfoot episodes of Les Stroud in our description. So if you guys want to watch them, they're pretty fun to watch. And he just you can watch. I think he's got both of them, just the regular episodes and the ones where he actually talks about them in the later times. So
yeah, and I find him really credible, you know, because he's not, you know, like if you ever watched the show Finding Bigfoot, which I watched when it was on, and I loved it, even though it was so silly, but it was fun to watch.
yeah,
But you had the guy Bobo. Everything was Bigfoot.
yeah,
No matter what he heard, everything was Bigfoot.
yep.
You know, and that's just a little too much for me.
And,
you know,
and Les talked about that too. He's like, I would try to like contain that or whatever, and things like
Debunk
that.
it.
Yeah, and
like,
oh no, that's not. We don't have any proof that that's that. But me and Nikki have talked about that before with all the ghost ones too, where it's just like there's certain people that it's just like everything is like it doesn't matter, even if you can see something, like you see a lamp fall and it's like. It's a ghost. It's like you could have knocked it over and seen it fall, and it's like that was a ghost. It's like you just knocked the lamp over.
My camera falling was definitely a ghost. I think a ghost just did that. Yeah.
Oh, but anyway, I did while we were talking about this. This is going back to something we talked about a little bit ago. Look up circus train crashes in the country, and this is. The website is called circusesandsideshows.com. So very credible website. But it lists all the different crashes and like where they took place. And there's 2 of them on this list. There's 3 of them on this list in Missouri. One was in St. Louis in 1887. Was the John Robinson Circus. The Ringling Brothers Circus had a train crash in Centralia, so just 30 minutes,
not too far
30 minutes north of here, in 1892, and then the other one was in St. Louis. Oh, that's the same one. Never mind. Okay, yep. So St. Louis in 1887 and Centralia in 1892. So it doesn't list one on here for around Fort Leonard Wood.
And that doesn't surprise me.
Yeah.
You know, because you never.
Yeah.
Every time Grandpa said something like that, it's like, how does he know that? You know? Well, somebody told him.
Yeah.
Who was told by somebody else.
Yeah, exactly.
You know.
But I mean, it's theoretically possible that an animal that did get loose in one of those from either St. Louis or Centralia, I mean, the Mark Twain Forest isn't that far away from here. Like, they could have wandered to that location.
Yeah.
Those animals roam and stuff, so that could have happened. But
well, it's kind of like we moved out. I lived on the East Coast for several years, and I was when we moved back, I was driving in Texas County after we'd lived here a few years. And I saw an armadillo cross the road in front of me. Yeah. Well, growing up, we didn't have armadillos.
Yeah.
When I grew up down there, and I was like, "What the heck is that?" You know, and I knew what it was, but we didn't have those. And so I looked it up, and according to the Missouri Department of Conservation, they have slowly migrated their way north.
Yeah.
And they're like, eventually they're going to be all the way to Canada.
Yeah.
You know, they're going to become familiar with the weather, and they're going to just slowly keep migrating north. And it's open season on them, by the way.
Yeah, interesting.
And so, and don't touch them because they'll give you leprosy. So
interesting.
I did not know that.
I would prefer to not get leprosy.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, not that I would touch an armadillo anyway, but that's good to know.
Yeah. So I say that things definitely migrate. Just in, you know, I was 30 years, you know, and we now have a population.
Yeah.
So
which is kind of crazy.
Yeah, it is.
Well, thanks for sharing your story, Tom, because that's really interesting.
Yeah, it's super interesting.
And I can understand, like, you know, when you said you were younger and you didn't really talk about it, I can totally understand that. Luckily, people have gotten more open about it and things in the past several years, or 10, 20 years or something. So
there's definitely still a stigma though, because I feel the same way when we do paranormal episodes on this podcast. And especially because my first time on this podcast was with Kevin and Stevie.
the
I came
Missouri
on
State
as a guest to
Penitentiary.
talk about ghosts. I was terrified
Yeah.
to talk about it because there's such a stigma.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
that's unfortunate because we don't want that. Like everybody has their things, and you can't. I liked going back to Les Stroud, Survivorman. I liked how he talked about it. Is like, there's so many people with these stories, and that you have only a couple options that it could be. It's either they're lying to you,
Yeah.
which everybody lying with pretty so much the same story or similar stories is going to be a difficult thing to do. And also, if you don't think somebody is just an inherent liar, why would you all of a sudden call them a liar about this?
Yeah.
Or they're telling you the truth about what they saw.
Yeah. And that's where I'm coming from. It's
Yeah.
like, I see all these TV shows and it's like, okay, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
But, that guy's telling a story and I believe what he saw.
Yeah.
Because I know what I saw.
Yeah.
And so other than as far as making, suppositions about, what exactly what it is, well, I have no idea. And the whole, in the last few years that, I started hearing about all this paranormal stuff to go with it. And I'm like, well, I didn't experience anything like that.
Yeah.
But of course we didn't even have cameras,
Yeah.
so, so I don't know. But I know what I saw.
Yeah.
It was definitely real.
Yeah.
And it scared the heck out of me,
Well, I'm sure.
Yeah.
but
Can't imagine what it would be like to see something like that.
yeah.
So,
And I almost think it would be different now, like I think it would still be scary, but at least I
you kind of have an idea.
kind of have an idea, and they don't have a reputation for hurting people.
Mm-hmm.
So, but back then it's like we had nothing.
You don't have any
We had no reference at all.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
It also feels like now you would probably be okay with you might not freeze, you might just grab the shotgun and be okay. Just seems like that's your personality,
Well-
so you might have that.
well, I've asked myself many times, if I had to go do it again, would I shoot it? And
Just
I
piss it
really
off.
don't know what the answer to that is. We usually carried, if we had a shotgun, we had double aught buck, which is a good heavy load.
Yeah.
And if you hit something like that right, yeah, it'll kill it.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I don't know if I would shoot it or not,
Yeah.
Now, if it's going to harm me, yes.
You're going to try to
Yeah.
do whatever you can. Yeah.
But like, why would I shoot it other than just to have a trophy,
Yeah.
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 And I never, growing up, we hunted a lot, but we never killed anything that we didn't eat.
Yeah.
So that's just how we were raised. We had to sometimes go kill to get the freezer full.
Yeah.
And so that was our, you killed it, you were going to eat it.
Yeah.
And something like that, it wasn't a threat to us. If I had my wits about me, would I have shot it? I don't know if I would or not. I probably wouldn't have.
Yeah.
I may have had the gun up.
It'd be
Yeah.
yeah, it'd be so fascinating to just observe if it didn't notice you and you could watch what it was doing, where it was going. I think that would be so fascinating, but
Yeah.
I would be terrified.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think something that lives in the woods that keeps hidden probably has a very good sense of what's around them.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And probably has a lot better hearing than we do.
Yeah.
And has probably a lot of more senses. Their senses are probably a lot more attuned
Yeah.
to living out there.
It knows what's around better than
Yeah.
what we do. Yeah.
It's hard to walk through the woods without making noise.
Yeah.
You can do it, but it's hard.
Yeah.
So we never tried to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And of course we're in a truck, so we're making noise.
Yeah.
But all the times we would go romp around in the woods, we weren't trying to be
Yeah.
quiet.
You're not trying to be quiet. You're just
So-
having fun. Yeah.
How many times did we get close to one and never knew?
That's true.
So who knows?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's it's really interesting, which is it, and it's really interesting and it's really cool. So, but Yeah, I think that's wraps that up. But
Mm-hmm.
I told you that we might talk about switching gears entirely. Transition.
We need a spacer.
I got sounds. I don't know what would work. Here's a newsy sound. Let's see what this is.
Now there you go.
Okay. Transition. Planes. You're big into planes.
Yeah.
And I heard a news story today that I didn't know before was that you almost got to fly on one you didn't expect back in the day, which sounds like fun. But so you like flying.
Yeah.
You used to fly a lot more than you do now.
Yeah.
Is there a plane? I think we've talked about this before, but is there a plane that you wish you could fly on or want to fly on that you don't know that you ever will, or it's already been, out of service or whatever? Is there something that you would like to fly on?
Yeah. So in my opinion, all the airplane, and I'm talking commercial airliners, because that's where my passion is. I love the big heavy jets.
Yeah.
So in my opinion, all the airplanes that are being produced today are all very cookie cutter.
Yeah.
They all kind of look the same.
Yeah, they do.
Now, don't get me wrong. I can tell them apart, and I know which is which, and because I'm just a geek,
Yeah. There's nothing
But-
wrong with that.
But the technology advances they've made just in the last 10, 20 years is amazing. And, they're continuing that. But really, I would want to go back and fly in the 70s. You had the brand new 747, which was just way ahead of its time.
Yeah.
And that was a huge success for Boeing, of course. And it was just something nobody had ever seen before when that thing came out. And the pilots that flew it loved it. They said it was one of the easiest airplanes to fly. And the first commercial airplane I ever stepped on was a Boeing 747. It was a TWA at LAX. We lived in LA until I was 10 years old, and then we moved to Missouri.
Okay.
And so a field trip when I was in second grade, they took us to LAX, and we got to go on 2 airplanes. I don't remember anything else about the tour of the airport.
Yeah.
I think we went up in the control tower, but I'm not 100% sure of that.
Yeah.
But I remember we went on board a 747 and we went on board a Boeing 707.
Okay.
And I remember they were getting the 747 ready for a flight, and we got on there and the crew was on there. And I remember the spiral staircase, and I remember there was a chef on board. He had the big chef hat.
Oh my
and
gosh.
He was making food.
Huh.
And I was just amazed.
That is cool.
And so they wouldn't let us go upstairs,
Yeah.
which I really wanted to go upstairs, but they wouldn't let us.
So in a normal 747, is that what's first class in a normal 747?
Well, it is now.
Okay.
But back in those days, it was a lounge,
Oh.
and it's where the pilots are.
Yeah.
And so the original 747, the upstairs was a very small space, and TWA had like lounge chairs up there, and they had like a piano bar up there,
Interesting.
and they had a guy to
Wow.
play the piano, and you could go up there and get a drink and
Okay.
sit down and smoke and have a drink.
That seems kind of like what I've seen in commercials with like Emirates is trying to do with their big, like those big A380s, the big
Yeah,
double decker.
they have a small bar area
Yeah.
on the A380s.
Okay.
Nobody really does it anymore because it's
all about money.
it's
and
all about
as many
getting as many
seats.
people on there as
Yeah.
you can. And
Yeah, it's profit over
Yeah.
experience.
yeah. And back then they were making money because the seats were so expensive.
Yeah.
Only the rich people could afford to fly. Mm-hmm. But that was kind of my beginning of, and my dad was a pilot. He was a private pilot.
Oh,
And
okay.
so that was kind of my interest in aviation. But stepping on that airliner for the first time, I was just amazed. So,
Interesting. I've flown several times, but I don't really know what the planes were. Until recently. But I do remember flying TWA when I was a little kid before it went out of business or was bought over by American. And the only time that I remember ever being worried, and it was just me and my dad being dumb and not really knowing anything about planes, we were getting ready we were leaving out of Springfield to go on vacation. And we got to the airport, and sitting outside the air, you could see out the window on the tarmac, you could see this big TWA plane that had big plane with 2 propeller engines.
Yeah.
And me and my dad were making jokes the whole time, like, you think that thing's going to get off the ground? Like, you think it's going to be able to get us to where we're going? And because, neither one of us had ever flown we had always driven to Kansas City or Tulsa or something. So we'd always taken a jet wherever we were going. This is the first time we'd ever flown out of a small airport like Springfield. So now I don't remember what happened, but for some reason we didn't end up getting on that plane, and we ended up getting on another jet. So I don't know what the difference was, but yeah, it was interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love the props.
Yeah.
I love, I've been on several prop airliners over the years, and they're different, they're smaller, but to me, that's fun.
Yeah.
Because you feel more like you're flying in those. And they're loud and clunky and, and they're just fun to me, they're just fun to fly on. So.
Nikki, do you like flying? I know a lot of people don't like flying.
Commercially, yeah, I sleep the whole entire time. It's very calming to me.
Okay.
But do I have the desire to go on these old planes and things? It's never been that interesting to me. Now, I was interested in the past of some of the history of McDonnell Douglas and Boeing, only because my grandpa worked there, and I was more interested in hearing about. He was always on the picket lines and things like that for Boeing when they bought out, and that stuff was more interesting to me, not necessarily the plane specifically.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'm kind of ashamed of what Boeing has become.
It's gone downhill.
It's very different.
Years, so
yeah, it's what they're going through now and what they've gone through the last few years is kind of very disappointing.
Yeah.
Because I've always been a big fan of Boeing. I still like Boeing airplanes. And I would get on any Boeing airplane right now without a hesitation.
Mm-hmm.
And as a matter of fact, it took me forever to finally get on a MAX, but I was able to get on a MAX earlier this year.
Mm-hmm.
And no hesitation.
Yeah.
And I would have got on a MAX at any point when they weren't flying them. I would have got on one at any point with an American crew.
Yeah.
With the U.S. space crew. I would have done it. So,
Okay.
don't know that I would have flown one overseas.
Yeah.
But I would have definitely flown one here.
Yeah, I get that. I hadn't flown. I just went on vacation like a year ago. And everybody knows that I'm a Disney adult. That's where I went, is Disney World. But,
yeah, I know, because you were gone from work for 2 weeks.
Yeah. Hey, I think it was 2.5 weeks.
Yeah, I think it was, actually.
But, that was the first time I had flown since all the Boeing stuff started happening, because I hadn't flown before that 15 years, so it had been a while. And I don't know that I would have cared either way. I think the planes that I flew on were all Airbuses, though. Airbuses and I don't know what flew
Well,
out
the
of
one out of
Columbia.
Columbia wasn't.
Yeah, whatever flew out of Columbia.
I think you were on an Embraer.
That was possible.
Yeah. And see, to me, it doesn't make sense that you would get on a plane and not know what kind of plane you're on. I want to know.
I flew overseas. We flew from St. Louis to Boston or somewhere on the East Coast. It was late at night, I forget. And then to London and then to Scotland. I didn't know any of those planes. I had no idea. I was just responsible for buying the tickets.
Yeah, and I just don't understand that. To me, it's like I even keep track of the tail numbers of the airplanes I fly on, you know. And when a job I used to have, I would go to Chicago every so often, and I would fly from Columbia to Memphis, and then Memphis to Chicago.
Okay.
Back when Northwest was in business, and they would fly a fun little prop airliner from here to Memphis. I loved that little Saab that they used. But the flight from Memphis to Chicago, on one of the trips, I looked at the tail number of the plane. I was like, oh, the last time I flew this flight, I was on that same airplane.
Huh.
And so to me, that's just interesting.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, I've got more than one flight on this one airplane.
Yeah.
It's kind of cool.
That's kind of cool. Yeah.
So
if you keep
so many
track of that, that's kind of cool. Because there's so many flights all over the place. It's hard to believe that you would be on the same plane for a couple flights over however long it was. But
Yeah. And then
Now,
I'm interested.
you said that there was, yeah, you said there was no reason not to get on a Boeing flight, or no reason you would not get on a plane. Is there anything in the future that would make you get on a plane and get off and not take a flight?
Well, yes. If I'm on an airplane and say it's wintertime and I see ice or snow on the wing and we get de-iced, and when we're done being de-iced, I look out and there's still ice and snow on the wing, I'm going to be pushing my flight attendant call button until I get attention, because I'm going to make it known you're not taking this plane off with me on it until that gets cleaned up, because now that's a safety hazard. And, de-icing is one thing that the pilots rely on someone else outside the airplane to do that.
Yeah.
Now, those people are trained how to do it. And, there was a flight, and I don't remember, it wasn't in the U.S., but there was a flight somewhere, and I don't remember where it was, but in the last couple of years where that happened. And a flight attendant looked out the window and saw there was still snow, like thick snow on the wings. And she picked up the phone and called the captain and said, hey, we're not done being de-iced.
yeah,
And so they had to go back and finish. And if they would have taken off, they would have crashed. And so yeah, something like that, I would definitely
I
speak
didn't know
up.
that.
now, do I remember correctly? I feel like you told me one time you almost did get off a plane for a reason, or said that you wouldn't fly on it. Is that right? Maybe I'm misremembering something, but I feel like there was an instance where you said that you told somebody you it wasn't gonna take off with you on it or something.
Yeah, I'm not remembering. There was something, but I don't remember what it was.
Remember what it was?
Yeah.
Okay.
I get random memories pop up sometimes.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, we always have some random conversations at work, so it's just always random things that pop up all the time. But I think
I'm like, what was that?
So Nick, did you bring any fun facts for this week?
Of course I did, Kev, and it's on topic of cryptids. Um, so this one is about Scotland. Shocker, go figure. So haggis is a Scottish delicacy made from the organs of a sheep. I don't know if you guys have tried this. I liked it. It was actually good.
I haven't
don't
tried
But
it.
know that I have.
You haven't?
But I'm not sure.
I liked it. I thought it was actually good. It's just very weird. It's very much a cultural food.
Mm-hmm.
So it's made with sheep, organs of sheep. But one of the big things in Scottish culture is to tell travelers to Scotland that a wild haggis is a real animal, and it's not. It's a fictional animal, but they have gone so far as to trick American visitors with pictures that are definitely photoshopped of wild haggises. And it's so much ingrained, this myth in their culture now, that there was a study done. Now, this is a study, a survey, and I put that in air quotes. I don't know where this came from, but it said 1 in 4 American visitors to some website clicked on that they did believe that this creature was real. And I thought that was so funny. It's so ingrained. Just this one random
I'm not surprised by that at all.
Oh man. Okay. Interesting.
We were just the other day, maybe even yesterday at work, we were talking about head cheese.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because there was a recall on it.
Yeah. Recall on Boar's Head cheese.
Nikki, do you know what head cheese is?
No.
So it's made with the brains of a pig. And is
that real?
It's made into a loaf of, it's used like lunch meat.
Oh, okay.
But it's made into a loaf, and it's sliced and put on sandwiches. And my grandma used to make it. And it was so nasty.
Brains and eggs.
Brains and eggs. Grandpa would have brains and eggs for breakfast sometimes. Yeah.
I always loved weird meats like that, like Braunschweiger. Love.
Yep. Oh, I do too.
I love Braunschweiger. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I eat bologna sandwiches on a regular basis, which is just basically everything left over that they grind into a paste and put into a mold. So
yeah.
So I found I kind of gave away one of mine earlier, which was the the whole the paintings of the Sasquatch from back in the day. But so the name originates from like a rough translation from like the word hairy man or the phrase hairy man, which makes sense. But there are stories from like a long time ago of creatures, of them actually being shape-shifting, and they're like creatures that protect the forest, which is interesting. Protecting the forest doesn't surprise me. The shape-shifting is a little weird to me, because I've never heard any stories of them but being like basically a 10-foot tall ape/human.
Yeah.
So the shape-shifting is an interesting
So what was the origin?
story.
Did you say what the origin of Sasquatch, the word Sasquatch was? Is it like an Indian origin, maybe? American Indian?
Yeah, it's like Canadian First Peoples, Halcomelem. I think
language.
I found that same fact. Yeah.
Okay.
Is where it comes from. I don't know what halcomelem is though. Let's see if
That's just the like tribe, and that's their dialect.
Yeah.
That it comes from. It's like Sesquac was the original word, and then it turned into Sasquatch.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm wondering, when you talk about shape shifting, the Indians are very spiritual people, Native Americans,
Yeah.
especially back, when they were the only ones here, very spiritual, have a lot of gods and stuff like that. And I'm wondering if they kind of pulled all that in together and made it more of a mystical creature that they only saw every once in a while. And
that's possible.
That was my first thought too.
Maybe when they were smoking the peace pipe, they were.
Hey, things happen when you
smoke the peace pipe
and go on those little and go on your journey.
Yeah.
Your spiritual journey. So
yeah.
Did you have any fun facts, Tom? Anything? I kind of forgot to tell you to bring one.
No, I do have one actually.
Okay.
So a friend of mine is an art professor at Mizzou.
Okay.
And I don't get to see him that often anymore, but his name is Matt Ballou.
Okay.
And I found out today that he is now doing the Mizzou football player paintings.
Oh.
For the All-American, the guys that make All-American. And he added 4 paintings today to the wall that they have inside the Mizzou facility.
That's cool.
And he put that on Facebook, and I was like, wow, that's really cool. And the paintings are just beautiful.
Yeah.
And so he's a very talented artist.
That's cool.
And so I was, several years ago, he asked me to come sit for him. And he did a charcoal drawing of me.
Oh, that's cool.
And then he gave that to me
cool.
as a thank you for coming to sit with him.
Nice.
And what he did for a few years is he did a thing called Becoming the Student, and he would invite friends to come to his art studio and sit down and have a glass of whiskey, and he would spend 2 hours, and he would draw your portrait. And he did some with paint and some with charcoal and different, he uses all different methods. But I have that portrait at home that he gave me framed. It's just beautiful.
That's cool.
And but I saw that today, and you should check out his Facebook page, Matt Ballou, Ballou, and you can see those paintings.
All right.
So
that's cool.
So yeah, I sent him a note and I said, man, those are great.
Yeah.
Good job.
That's awesome.
So anyway.
Well, I think
that's cool.
That is about it for this week. Tom, thank you very much for coming on.
Thanks for having me. I'm glad to know I'm now insufficient.
Yeah, you're always insufficient, and we're all insufficient, and we'll all continue to be insufficient for the rest of our lives. So,
it's nice meeting you, Nikki.
I'm very insufficient. Yeah, it was nice to meet you too.
Of course, Kevin, I'll see you on Monday.
Yeah, we'll see you on Monday, man. So, okay, everybody, don't forget to like, subscribe, comment. We'll get you shouted out. We didn't have any this week, but, that's because you guys don't comment. So, Anyway, we'll talk to you guys next week.